Welcome to Thumbing Through Yesterday, the podcast where we take our favorite books from the shelf, dust them off, and remind ourselves why it is we love them so. My name's Tom Galley, and joining me today is Tony Pasculi.
Happy to be here.
And what are we talking about today?
Today we are talking about the Legacy of Heorot. I think that's the correct pronunciation. I looked it up, but I don't know.
That sounds good to me.
Yeah, in my head for 20 years I've been calling it the Legacy of Heorot. So with a French pronunciation, but it's not French. It's Heorot is the Hall of the Heroes. So I believe.
Yeah, this is from Beowulf.
Yeah.
And Niven and Pournelle.
And Barnes. Niven and Pournelle and Barnes. I don't know how that works with three authors on a book.
I don't either, but I know anytime I see Niven, there's a 95% chance I'm going to love it. And if it's Niven and Pournelle, there's a 105% chance I'm going to love it. So any other names they stick on there just don't interest me, which is probably sad because I'm sure Barnes helped.
Did you love it?
I did, but it's not the first time I've read this, but I did love this, yes.
All right. I had an interesting reaction to this book. I did not love it. I did not love it. And it's my pick.
Okay, well, let's start with this. Why did you think this would be a favorite?
I thought it would be a favorite because I've read it a number of times before, really enjoyed it. And it's been bopping around in my head ever since we read Tunnel in the Sky.
Okay.
And having read it in such close proximity to Tunnel in the Sky now, I think it's just a weaker book in every aspect. So I just found it very disappointing. It's longer, it's duller, the characters are more cynical and less optimistic. Needlessly cruel. The action goes on far too long. It's just, by the time we get to the end, I'm just like, I'm over this. Over this. 100 pages of killing Grentals. Ugh. Yeah. And that's not really fair to the book. I think anyone who reads this book for the first time is going to find it an amazing thrill ride. I did the first time I read it.
Yeah.
But now I'm just kind of like, yeah, I'm over it.
There's a lot of Grendel killing that goes on.
There's a lot.
That. And, I think we've made this comment with other Niven books as well. Character development and character interactions is just not his strength. And apparently it's not Pournelle or Barnes' strength either.
Yeah.
And there, more than once, there was a conversation we're in the middle of where I was like, wait a minute, who are we talking to? Who's talking to? Why is this woman here nursing when a second ago she was in the other room? Yeah. There were some discontinuities, and then the people are just not good people.
They're not
Even
good people.
The ones we're supposed to think are good people, they're not good people.
Oh, who are we supposed to think is a good person?
We're supposed to think that Cadman is a good person.
Oh, Cadman's a dick.
We're supposed to think that Marianne's a good person.
Yeah, maybe.
We're supposed to think that Zach is a good person. I think we're supposed to think that.
Yeah.
We're supposed to think that Terry's a bad person, and Terry ends up being all right. I mean,
he has a little bit of a redemption arc. Terry is also a dick. He's a bigger dick than Cadman. Some of these people, well, actually, this is one of the clever things about the book, actually. I appreciated this, and it covers a lot of sins. They invent something called hibernation instability.
Which is lovely.
Yeah. So a bunch of these people who are picked to be the best of the best, the absolute brightest, and they come through, they get cryogenically frozen for the transport to this alien world decades away, and they come out with deficiencies.
Yeah.
And some of them are just, psychological deficiencies, and others are cognitive deficiencies. These brilliant people are less than brilliant now, and they feel that, and it guts them, and that's great. I love that.
Yeah, it is a nice touch, and it's a really good way to keep them in the dark about the plot.
Yes.
Something that, if they had been functioning at high level and had all their facilities available and hadn't had their single computer destroyed,
yes.
They would have realized what was going on immediately, and this book would have been very different.
Yeah. Yeah. Although, again, we have to, they're on an alien planet.
Yeah.
And they do know that there's it's an alien ecosystem. They don't understand. They're introducing a lot of Earth stuff, and they need to, because they need that to survive. And they are concerned. They're on an island, which is clever. They're not on the mainland, so they can sort of isolate to an extent. But then they go through and they wipe out the alpha predator deliberately. And it's just like, yeah, that's a good idea. That's always a good idea.
Yeah. Well, I mean, there are a couple of things that just make no sense, even with hibernation instability thrown in there.
Yeah.
Now, we've got the trope, and it's a little bit worn out, where Cadman, we have the one military expert thrown into this entire group of scientists who are completely dismissive of his concerns after the first week is over and nobody's died.
Yeah.
Like, poo-poo, you know. And he takes that personally and takes it to heart. And, even when he's vindicated and proven right, he's like, screw you guys, I'm going over there. But this is the guy who, running around in the field with a dog one evening, the dog disappears, and he doesn't care. He's like, oh, well, it'll come back.
Yeah.
No, this is the soldier guy. This is the paranoid guy whose job it is to be suspicious of everything. What do you mean the dog ran away? And nope. They would have been on lockdown. They would have been on high alert.
Yeah, because... Yeah, I mean, maybe you could chalk that up to hibernation instability. If he just assumes the dog's out exploring and will come back, because they haven't seen a sign of any predators at this point, right? And so they're not thinking that the dog has been taken. So, yeah.
Yeah, and of course, the dog dies. Right?
Yeah.
So for those of you that avoid movies or books based on whether or not the dog dies in this one.
Oh, there's so much death in this one.
People can die, that's all right, but if the dog dies...
Yeah. So much death, so much pain. All right, let's talk about the monster. Because the monster is great. I love the monster. They talk about its nasty habit, and I assume its nasty habit is its reproductive cycle. But the thing that I love about this is the speed. It's got a speed sac,
a mega adrenaline organ.
Yeah, so it's this huge thing. The size bigger than a Siberian tiger. But it can move at the speed of a cheetah or faster for an extended period, but then it sort of overheats and it has to cool off, has to jump back in the river. So it moves way faster than anyone expects it to be able to move. Yeah. When it's got a spiked tail like a stegosaurus, or a thagomizer. Yeah.
Yep, the thagomizer. Yeah, I mean, this thing is just fearsome, and some of the descriptions are a little contradictory, but it's massive, it's large, it is armored.
Yep.
It has a turbocharge that moves faster than human perception.
Yeah.
And when you talk about it overheating, we're talking about it generates steam when it jumps back into the water.
Yes.
It will literally cook itself to death. Not just overheat, literally cook itself. It generates so much heat. So, it's fearsome, and it violates all of our expectations of what a predator would be, or exceeds all of our expectations of what a predator could be.
Yes. Yeah, and so you have this thing, and it's just roaming around, and this is a massive apex predator, and actually, there's actually some hints that maybe on the mainland. That there are even bigger things which will eat these. Mm-hmm. But here, this is the top of the food chain. It's the absolute top of the food chain. And then they find that there are a bunch of them, and they like to hide out in these little holes, and they systematically eliminate them. And not one of these scientists goes, what happens if you remove the apex predator from this ecosystem?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And they find out.
They find out
in a bad way.
Yeah.
But this is, again, we've got the biologists and the experts. They have varying degrees of hibernation instability, so they can't access their memories. They can't process the information, although we maddeningly keep getting these hints of them saying, I feel like I should be remembering something.
Yes.
I'm troubled by my dreams about this thing, which, oh God, the tropiest of tropes, right? But coincidentally now these things, they're not sentient, but they are smart. Yeah. And after the second encounter with the first Grendel, it comes looking for revenge, right? It's killed a dog, it's killed a couple of cows, it's killed a person, and Cadman survived that encounter just barely. And now his teammates have locked him in the infirmary. They think he might have murdered the person. They think he might be suffering from hibernation instability.
That's a chilling scene where
that monster breaks into it stalks him to the
Yeah.
camp. It sits there and it watches the camp long enough to find a way in without setting off alarms, without being noticed. It comes for him.
Yes.
I mean, this is revenge that we're talking about.
Is at least as smart as a shark in one of the Jaws movies.
Yep. Yep.
Yeah. Yeah, that scene you're talking about where Cadman, who this is his nightmare. This is the most horrific thing he's ever seen. It's way beyond humans' ability to deal with. It is so fast and so strong, and so incredibly dangerous. And one, he's like a Cassandra. He's screaming about the threat of this thing, and everyone's ignoring him, or worse, blaming him. Mm-hmm. And two, they strap him to a table, and then he is there completely helpless when this thing breaks in to eat him. Yeah, and he just has nightmares about that. It's just the most chilling scene in the book.
Yeah, and that is the
great.
That is when he unleashes himself, right? When
Yes.
he survives that, he's like, "I'm done with you people."
Yeah.
As soon as he's able to walk, and not well, he
Yeah.
leaves and starts
Yeah.
carving out something in the mountains, a stronghold in the mountains for himself.
Yes, which they immediately label Cadman's Folly. Yeah. Or he calls it Cadman's Bluff. They call it Cadman's Folly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Now, there's a moment in there that I thought was handled poorly, and that they have been dismissive of him. Mm-hmm. At least a substantial portion of the camp thinks he's a murderer, not a victim. And yet when that monster breaks into camp and is stalking him, he's saved by the fact that more than 4 people armed with rifles show up. Mm-hmm. Now, up to that moment, the fact that he had a rifle was a big screaming deal, as if, they didn't bring a whole lot in the way of arms, and they certainly didn't believe they needed to have them. And yet all of a sudden you have a handful of militia turning out to save the day there. I thought that was stretching things a bit. Of course, if it didn't happen that way, then Cadman would have gotten eaten.
Yes.
And
then it turns out they have tons and tons of arms when they need to fight off the swarm,
Yep.
which develops later.
So many landmines. They have flamethrowers and jellied gasoline. How much of this stuff is back into the spaceship?
I know. They seem to have enough armaments here to fight off a small nation, which they essentially have to do.
Yep. But they don't have enough of the high-tech materials to build a second reactor, right?
Yeah.
When the reactor gets damaged, their choice is to cannibalize one of their orbital craft if they want to get the generator up and running. So they didn't bring spare parts for the generator on which their entire civilization depended, but they've got pallets of landmines.
Yeah. So we're nitpicking here. And
We are, but it gives us a lot of nits.
Yeah, it does. It does give us a lot of nits. I want to emphasize that for a first-time reader, this is a great thriller. I mean, there's a great mystery at the heart of it, and it's a really exciting thrill ride all the way through. There's a lot of suspense. There's a lot of action. There's a lot of danger. I've read it now probably 4 or 5 times. But this is the first time I've read it in such close proximity to Tunnel in the Sky. Mm-hmm. And I just like Tunnel in the Sky better. It deals with a lot of the same themes. I like the colonists better, even though they're not even starting a colony. They're an accidental colony. But I like their whole approach to colonization better than these very deliberate colonists. I like the way they approach threats in Tunnel in the Sky. And these guys are just sort of very dismissive of threats.
Yep.
And what's really frustrating is that not just the authors, but the colonists have read Heinlein. And they refer to some of these creatures as dopey Joes.
Yes, the dopey Joes. They find some herbivores up in the mountains, and they call them dopey Joes. And they even say it's a literary reference. Cadman says it's a literary reference. So it's a reference to, like you said. But also, I don't know if you caught this, there was a reference in there to 7 League Boots.
I did not catch that
which there were Starship
Troopers?
No, from the last book, from Who Goes Here.
Oh.
He was issued a pair of Star Trooper 7 Leaguer boots, right?
Right.
That had the little click.
Well, 7 League boots are also a thing from fairy tales.
Yeah.
Yeah, Jack and the 7 League Boots. Yeah.
But I thought that was interesting that we picked 2 books back to back that had 2 adjacent books that happened to have references to 7 League Boots in them.
There's also a reference to another Heinlein book, Red Planet, which I haven't read in a while and need to revisit. Talking about seed pods, burning the seed pods. I don't remember Had to burn the egg sack, Cadman said. Jerry grinned. I've read Red Planet too.
Yeah.
I don't remember that from Red Planet. So
I don't know if I've read Red Planet. Maybe that'll show up in the near future. Who knows?
Not one of my picks.
Oh, it can't be one of mine if I haven't read it.
It's a Heinlein juvenile, but it's just far down on the list. Podkeen of Mars would be ahead of Red Planet for me. So
I liked once they acknowledged that the Grindles existed, and they started treating them like animals. I love the fact that Cadman came up with a virtually foolproof way to kill those next adults.
Yeah.
Right. They had a system where they would bait and enrage the creature. Then they would fire at it from a distance, and it would flee. They would conspicuously leave it an avenue to run away, so it would run into landmines and or foo gas. And beyond that, they had people with flamethrowers. So it just became a massacre once they figured out. Once the second one, which they didn't believe in.
Yeah.
Right? They thought there couldn't be a predator there. There couldn't be a big predator because there wasn't enough food.
Yeah.
And there was a big predator, and like, oh, it must have come ashore from the mainland. There's just not enough food. And then there was an even bigger one. And finally they're like, well.
Yeah. Must have floated here on coconuts.
Yeah.
So do we want to spoil the secret, the terrible secret of the Grendel?
Well, my expectation is that people listening to these have read the books already.
Yeah, okay.
So if that's not the case for you, you might want to stick your fingers in your ears here.
Yeah. So that the limited ecosystem is due to the fact that the Samlin, the rivers, is it Samlin or Slammin?
They named them Samlin because the closest Earth analog they felt was the salmon.
Yeah.
So they switched the L and the M there. It's Samlin.
That made me crazy reading this book. I'm just like, every time I read it, just like, just a little grimace reading that.
And even though they go out of their way to say they're not really fish.
Yeah.
They acknowledge they're not really fish, but still, whatever. They're colonists. They can pick their names.
So there's not a lot on this island. There's the Samlin in the rivers, and there's these Grendel, and there's some birds up in the mountains. The birds won't come lower down. And there's like some other stuff up in the mountains also, but that's basically it.
Yep.
Yeah. And then it turns out the Samlins are just baby Grendels. Yeah. And it's the adult Grendels that keep the Samlin population in check. And if there are no adults around, that all of the Samlin turn into Grendels, whereas before enough of them would get eaten up that they wouldn't. Mm-hmm. And so instead of having, what was it, like a dozen roughly on this island?
6. They specifically, when they kill the last one, they say it's the 6th.
Okay.
Now, I don't know if that's the 6th after the 2 that they did mortal combat with in the compound, or if it was 6 total, but yeah.
So then instead of having, 6 or 8 to deal with, they have hundreds, thousands?
We don't ever get a count, but
yeah it's a lot.
Thousands, it's a lot. And these things are all instinct driven, which mankind is able to, use against them in a couple of ways. But wow, would it have been easier if they had known what they were getting into? If they had listened to the one dissenter early on, or if their chief scientists hadn't had the hibernation sickness, or if the computer hadn't been selectively damaged.
Yeah. Well, they were, in fairness, they were going to run into trouble with these things eventually anyway, no matter what. Even if everyone had listened to every single thing Cadman said.
Now, at some point, they're going to have to have a showdown with.
Yes. Yes, they were going to encounter one of these things, and it would have been a bad encounter. That's how it is. So that's one of my quibbles with the book as I'm reading through it this time, is they set him up to be such an aggrieved hero. Yeah, it's just like they do everything they possibly can to piss him off.
Yeah.
So, and it just, this time around, I just felt they laid it on a little thick. But that's not something I noticed the first time I read it. So, yeah. First time I read it, I was like, oh, why are they being such jerks to Cadman? He knows. He knows.
Well, we know it's a book, and we know it's going to turn around. We know what's got to happen.
Yeah.
Right.
So you said that you started in on the sequel as soon as you finished this. Mm-hmm. And I had no desire to do that this time. I think I've read the sequel. I don't remember a thing about it.
Well, I'm maybe 20% of the way into it right now.
Yeah.
And so far, it's all teen angst and an us versus them with the Starborn versus the Earthborn. And I'm just not caring about it, and I'm not caring about any of the people. They're trying to plan an expedition to the mainland, so I'm hoping that they're going to go to the mainland and get their asses kicked, and then there'll be some.
That's right. That's something they're planning in the first book, and of course, circumstances
they keep talking
evolve.
about it, right? Yeah, but it never happens.
Taken over by that's interesting. Okay, a mainland expedition does sound interesting, although it sounds incredibly risky and like inviting trouble.
Yep.
But you got to know your planet.
20 years have passed in the second book, and they've got, in addition to the colony in Cadman's Bluff, they've got like 3 other established residences now, and they have kind of separated along starborn versus earthborn lines.
Yeah.
It's not hostile, but it's not friendly. And wow, do I just not care?
Yeah.
It's like, dude, it's still a challenge to survive.
One of the things, and I don't know why they chose to do this, but one of the things that just rubbed me the wrong way is that this is the first colony project from Earth. And they're expecting that, maybe technology will evolve so fast that other colonists will meet us out here at some point. And they hear from Earth, nah, we just gave up on colonization entirely.
Yep.
We're not going to bother with that anymore. That's it. You're on your own. Goodbye. Good luck. And just like, oh man, that is bleak. That is bleak.
And Earth didn't treat them very well at all. I mean, they periodically are sending data bursts back to Earth, but if I remember right, they only get 2 from Earth. Yeah. And it seems a little one-sided as far as conversations and support go.
Yeah, this is a very particular type of science fiction, but I prefer my science fiction to be a little bit more optimistic than that, if possible.
Yeah.
Yeah. This is, you know what this is? I feel like movie science fiction is almost a different genre from book science fiction. And this, because it's a lot more action oriented, and it's a lot more dystopian. And this feels like movie science fiction to me more than book science fiction.
I can see that.
Yeah.
Well, another nit I want to pick.
Oh, pick away.
The Skeeters. They say over and over again that the Skeeters are autogyros, and yet they have them doing things that autogyros can't do, such as hovering and taking off vertically.
Yeah.
The big rotor on the top of an autogyro is not powered. The only reason it spins is because you've got forward momentum and the wind is turning it. They're a fixed-wing aircraft that has a rotating wing. It's These guys are masters of science fiction. How can they not know this?
Yeah. I didn't even know they were autogyros. They must have blipped past that. I thought of them as tiny flying saucers because that's how they behave in the books.
They mentioned 4 or 5 times they label them as autogyros, which they've continued doing in the second book. And I even had to go and question myself and look it up on the internet.
Oh no, you're absolutely right about autogyros.
Yeah. If they are labeling them correctly, unless in the future, the labels get reassigned.
Yeah.
Such things could happen.
They're such weird craft. I mean, they look like helicopters, but they're not. They operate completely differently than helicopters.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So anyway, take that.
All right.
Niven and Pournelle and Baker?
Barnes. The only other, I'm not sure what else they've written together, but they did write something called Dream Park.
Dream Park is actually on my list of candidates.
Is it really?
Yeah.
Interesting.
I memorized a song from Dream Park, which I can still, all these years later, remember.
Interesting. Dream Park was one of that batch that just kind of like, just didn't lodge its way in my consciousness. But yeah, if we look at it again, I'll look at it again.
Well, that was another one of those I encountered in high school, so it may well be it looks different through, as you say, jaded eyes.
Yeah. I don't know that I have anything else on this book other than I will read Tunnel in the Sky several more times before I read this again. Yeah.
I had a good time going through it, and I looked forward to picking up the Kindle, knowing that it was there waiting for me. I think it's a good actiony bit. It does, the action sequence does drag on a little bit. The final climactic battle is several chapters long.
Oh my gosh, it's endless.
The character development, not so much character development as, look, I'm right. But yeah, I think it's still a good read, and I'm glad that we revisited it. Oddly enough, I had been kind of, over the past several months, that book had popped into my head, but I couldn't remember the name of it or the writers. but I remembered the Grindel and the Samlin, and I don't know why it had kind of been on my head, but when it popped up as our choice, I was like, oh, right, that book. I've been thinking about that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Again, maybe because of Tunnel in the Sky.
Maybe so. Maybe so. Definitely some strong parallels there.
Yeah. All right. So anyway, fun read. If you haven't read it before, pick it up, check it out. And if you have read it before, I don't know. I don't know what to tell you. What's next?
So next, we're going to change formats a little bit. We did a play, so I think, I feel comfortable moving away from a typical novel. We're going to do the graphic novel, The Watchmen. Alan Moore and Dave Gibbons.
So good. Can't wait to read that again.
Yeah,
what I like.
I had to buy a new copy. I loaned mine out, and I have no idea to whom or to where. So anyway, we'll see you in 2 weeks.
See you in 2 weeks.